the biggest thing to be aware of is that risk that the river can pose even when it looks safe. We've got a picture on the right, picture on the left. The one on the left, it's dramatic. It probably looks more dangerous to most. But as Kane's saying, that's a bit of water that you can read and navigate if you have the relevant level of experience. Picture on the right, that's a section of river called the Strid, possibly one of the most deadly bits of river in Europe. And we'll get into why in a bit. I just want you to remember how calm that looks and how inviting and safe. One of the biggest, most visible hazards in the river are these trees, other obstacles that come down and what we refer to as strainers or sieves. The water can push you up against them and basically get you stuck. Once you're on them, you really can't. Even spending a lot of time in the river, it's hard to really get your head around how much force pushes you up against these things until you've experienced it. In my case, in a safe, controlled training environment, but I'm very glad I've never had to. I think one of the better ways I can think to demonstrate, that's 1 metre square. If the river's flowing 3.6 kilometres an hour, a tonne of water moves through that every second. So if you can imagine all of that water is pushing you into one of these trees, I don't think there's any chance anyone's getting off that, no matter how experienced you are. Obviously, there's a lot of trees in the river. We all see that every day. But other features, rocks, and man-made features like the pipe Kane showed you, all have a very similar effect. For our purposes, they'll cause you just the same amount of harm. Difference is that some of them, like rocks, aren't as easy to spot. There's not always going to be branches sticking out of the river that you can see and easily avoid. You've also got these undercuts, which is what makes that first river I showed you so dangerous. You can get sucked in under them, not find your way out. Only real example in Warrandyte I can think of is those cliffs just down from the bakery. There's some there, not too big, but it's something to note that there's always things going on that you can't necessarily see. Another feature, thankfully not too much of in Warrandyte, would be the low head down. Now these are things that scare me, and I'm sure some others in the room would back me up. You can look how calm that water looks above the weir there. This is Dites Falls, by the way. That was on a job where we were going to launch a little while upstream from the weir, where it was safe to do so, of course. A member of my unit who wasn't at the time experienced in swift water had looked at that river and said, yep, it looks safe, it looks calm. That's why we went down to show that. There's a few big hazards with these weirs. If we want to move on. One of the big ones is these holes, the hydraulics that Kane mentioned earlier. The way that the water will swoop in and it will backfill the space it made from moving so quickly, and it can spin you around, discombobulate you. It also creates this basically a vortex. It can suck you back into it if you're not careful. And it can look perfectly calm. From the top of that calm water, you've got this horizon line effect where you're looking from calm water to calm water below. You may not even see it. So I think this particularly comes into effect, obviously when you're paddling in the river, but also in floods where it's the environment's changed. And when you're crossing rivers, crossing flooded rivers, you often I find people get into trouble with this effect that it looks safe. You think you can either cross directly across or move down the river, but you just don't see the hazards below you because of this effect. The water's hiding the worst hazards. And flood is the other thing that we do. Look, in this context, a lot of what you see, we assist the police with search and with rescue on the river. But one of our biggest responsibilities is floods. And all of these things that we discussed tonight about the hazards in the river, they go just as much, if not more, for flooding. So we usually have our nice contained river, just doing river things. In Warrandyte, of course, it's all full of wreckage, it's full of mine shafts, it's all sorts of things in there. But it's relatively clear of debris, of rubbish, all of that sort of thing. But of course, then you get a flood, even a relatively minor one, and it includes all of these trees, it includes animals, it includes industrial waste. Anything that's within that floodplain suddenly becomes a part of the river and that becomes a hazard to you as well. So all of those strainers that you get in the river, now you've also got farm fences, for example, you've got road barriers, all sorts of additional hazards that even when you're familiar with an area, I can tell you from experience that a flood changes your perspective and your intimate knowledge of where everything is and hides those features. So that's sort of where we come back to those hidden features. The calm water on top doesn't necessarily mean that there's not a lot going on underneath. Here's a picture I took, I honestly don't remember where that was, it was definitely in Manningham though, of a lot of water moving through this drain under the, not a freeway, a road, that at the moment is visible. You can see what's happening there, but as I keep saying, it looks relatively calm, even though it's moving fairly quickly. If you add about another 60 centimetres of flood to that, that's going to become completely invisible, but still, that same amount, that ton of water is still moving through there every second, and that can suck you in. Which is why we really harp on the whole, don't drive through floodwater, don't play in floodwater, don't swim in it, it's just not worth it. If you're an experienced paddler and you know the river and you know the risks and you can read that, that's another issue. But the environment changes from what you know when it floods. I've seen roads collapse into sinkholes, I've seen manhole covers, they'll be lifted off by the first lot of rain as it pours through the drains, and then as the rest of the water starts to rise and the drains start doing their job again, they'll suck you right into it even though you've walked that exact same road 1,000 times before. And you can see what collects. All of that rubbish, the pollution, it's not something you want to be in. It's, yeah, the things we see when we're out in the floodwater. You don't want that in and around your face.